All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Chris. Nice job. It's always fun hearing Beaumont get talked about. I lived in Beaumont many, many years ago. I spent some time in Beaumont. It's an interesting place. It's fun to always hear something happening Beaumont related. All right, so talking about Minnesota, but I mean, this isn't a show and tell about Minnesota. There's plenty of that stuff out there. This and a lot of what the point of this presentation is about how different all of these programs are and then kind of relating some of the challenges and all that into it too. So it's it's safety service patrols on a national level, but through the lens of Minnesota and kind of the comparison between the two. Next slide. So there's stuff we'll talk about. Overview of what Minnesota does. How that fits with other programs, how it's very different than other programs. And like I said, the crazy thing is how incredibly diverse the number of service patrols are. How they are set up, what they are called, what they do is amazing. So if you are familiar with a service patrol, hopefully, or if you only have kind of a minimum amount of familiarity with a service patrol, hopefully you'll come out of this with a little bit kind of bigger idea of how many different ways there are to do it. And if you manage a service patrol, I'm guessing if you went to your neighboring states, you would find something completely different. Um, or you may even go to a different part of your state and find something completely different because that's just how spread out all of this is. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just interesting. And I'll talk a little bit about safehighways.org and the quarterly webinars and the Safety Service Patrol Pooled Fund Study. Give a plug for that, and then a couple of the other just sort of the challenges and opportunities that are going out there. Again, if you are on a leadership level and you can, kind of just plugging it into your thoughts, and you have a way to, kind of have these things in your in your march forward. And really, a lot of this is trying to, the service patrols is so much on a local level. There's elements of this that are national, and some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. So trying to kind of having that in your head as you move forward. All right, next slide. So there's the basics on Minnesota. Relatively small program, 23 drivers for fully staffed, morning supervisor, afternoon supervisor. We are all state DOT employees, and the service patrol and the dispatchers are all full-time, and the drivers are service patrol drivers. It's not borrowed from maintenance. They specifically are hired under that job class for that expectation. We've historically done 3/4 ton pickup trucks, and we moved more recently to 1 ton pickup trucks, but all with a short body. We've had with a short box. We've had the full matrix message boards on the trucks for the last 25 years or so. So that was a huge upgrade. A big change in what the program was 25 years ago was adding the message boards on the trucks. We only do short to intermediate emergency traffic control. We have a huge maintenance department here in Minnesota for plowing and as part of MnDOT. And if it's roughly over an hour, kind of in that hour and a half, 2 hour range, then maintenance would come out with the dump trucks and the crash attenuators and the big stuff and do longer traffic control. So we are just a short emergency traffic control role. We're also not 24/7. It's Monday through Friday with a morning shift and an afternoon shift. They share the truck. It's not a take-home truck. There's no on-call. There's no paging back, and then 2 trucks on the weekend. So it's a very strong program, but it is also very specifically just for the metro area. All right, next slide. Okay, so there's at least 80 programs, 80 service patrol programs nationally. And it's funny because this is one of the things that when I got hired 23 years ago, this was one of the first projects I got assigned to do was, well, come up with a list of all the service patrols that are out there. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty easy. That shouldn't be hard to do. And it was so confusing and so hard to like, is that a service patrol? That looks 100% different. Like they call themselves that, but it's like it's really different. Like it's a tow truck. Well, is that same as a pickup truck? This is not run by the DOT. This is a contractor. And it got, I just remember this 23 years ago, how confusing it was. And it's really not changed. It is still all over the place with a lot of different programs. So bearing bearing in mind that you have two basic kind of tasks that most service patrols are going to be doing, and that's motorist assistance, so some sort of free basic help to the public, give them some gas, help them change their tire, or tow/relocate them to a safer place, maybe a refuge area, something like that. So you got the free motorist assist to the public, get them off the road, and then the traffic incident management part. So blocking stuff, crashes, as a responder, trying to clear things, and if you can't clear it, then providing the emergency traffic control, right? So those are kind of your two most basic elements of that. And keeping in mind that there are some programs where only one unit does motorist assist and a completely different unit does the traffic incident management. And I think LA was one of the examples of that. That's just like blew my mind. Like you got 100 million tow trucks out here that are doing motorist assist, but they don't do any traffic incident management. That's a different unit. I mean, it works, right? It's what you do. It's just so interesting how different all these programs are. Then you have road maintenance. And throwing out the champ program in Georgia, where that is one of the things that they do is basic road maintenance. If they're not doing motorist assistance, they are cutting the kudzu off of the signs. Super important in the South. We have a huge maintenance program here in MnDOT, so that's always been kind of a political thing and a work thing of like, we're not doing maintenance. Maintenance is doing maintenance stuff. We have assisted with emergency maintenance, which basically is, if a road is flooded and somebody needs to go clear out a catch basin, we've done that, and we've helped out with emergency traffic, emergency lights if there's a really bad pothole or something. But that's another one too, where some programs are more into it, some programs are less into it. And then you can throw in this whole other thing of who's the person in the truck. Most cases it's either a DOT or a contractor, but you have ones where it's a cop, where it's law enforcement that's in it. It sounded like that was the case in Texas, and I know that's the case. I think it's the case in Arizona, where it's a trooper, and then down to Dane County, Wisconsin, where it's a sheriff's deputy. Um, Fire is even more, I would say, even more rare, but we had an opportunity last year to go and visit bunch of the tunnels in New York City, and one of the tunnels, the service patrol truck, was set up as a fire responder. It had foam on it, it had hose lines, it had SCBAs, it had turnout gear. The driver was trained as a firefighter because they would be the first responder. If there's a car on fire in the tunnel, they'd be the first responder. They put water on it and try to keep it under control until New York Fire got there, which is really interesting. And then, of course, for our friends out on the East Coast, assisting with evacuation response, right? You have to evacuate a 500,000 people, and then that's part of their role. But again, just shows just how different all of these programs are on a national level. Next, you can hit next. Geography, there's the range from having statewide programs, um, all the way down, and then you have metro programs like us. You may have multiple metro programs. One metro program may be completely different than another metro, all the way down to these specific site ones. Like I mentioned, the tunnels, but also the Golden Gate Bridge. So you have like an entire state that's covered down to something that's basically a couple of miles, and that's what the concentration is. Next, staff size. Ours was 22. I think the Atlanta Hero, I think, was 120. I had some number in my head about Los Angeles tow, and I think it was 600 tows. I might be off on that, but it was a pretty high number. Down to, like I'd mentioned before, Dane County, Wisconsin, where it was, I think, two trucks. So I don't know if that's a shared truck with two deputies or four deputies or not. But you can again, you can see the staff size differences. Next. And then really the big one is, are they government employees? Is it DOT? Is it a cop, or is it a contracted program? And that's one of the other ones that is really different from area to area or from locale to locale. Is it a contractor who you've hired to do it, or is it a worker? And it may not necessarily be a state worker. It might be a tollway worker. It might be something else. And then the other big one kind of is pickup truck versus tow truck. Just as another one looking from area to area. Next. So this is borrowing off of a comment from Vishali when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. You've seen one SSP program, you've seen one SSP program, because they're all so completely different. This is just a collection of a few pictures that I had taken over the years, and a few of these came from the state's websites. But even just on the most basic elements here, you've got, at the bottom right, you got a tow program. So this one's a flatbed, but you also have tow programs that are wreckers. Or in the top right, you have very specific wreckers. That's the Lincoln Tunnel one that had the firefighter gear on it. Then you have the pickup truck. So, well, if it's a pickup truck, is it an open box like on the bottom left of the Illinois Tollway? Is it a topper like the one in Denver on the left? Is it a like almost a walk-in topper? Or like the one on the right with the Hero program? Is it, a whole casing on the back of it with utility equipment and the pull-out with the cones? Completely different from area to area. Next slide. So, um, there's this kind of a super brief overview of just how different all these programs are and how diverse it is and how variable it all is from area to area. What the goals are, what the tools are, what the equipment is, who the staff is, and even just what the priorities are of what it is that they're out there to do. Um, One thing, and I will knock on some formica here. Hopefully, we are in a point of being relatively mature and established. I remember back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of flux, and you had programs being canceled, you had programs being privatized, and in some cases, the privatization made sense to go to a contractor. We came within 2 weeks in Minnesota of having our program be shut down in the early 2000s, and then it basically was saved at the last second. Um, Hopefully, we are at a point right now where it is fairly stable. I haven't heard that recently, but if political stuff, if the economic stuff changes, is it a first to go or is it not the first to go? And then there's always the opportunity, throwing it out there for folks. If you don't have a program, to add one, if there's another area of your state that could use it, and just having that idea that if you are expanding it or doing something differently, there are so many different options to go with, hopefully within your state's framework or your area's framework. Next one. I will mention dispatch, because a lot of times it doesn't get brought up, but that's also another one where there's a super huge difference from area to area, how dispatch is done. Um, and the funny thing is, I've had the opportunity to, I'd say a lot of these service patrols are dispatched by the TMC, but then the TMC may be a bunch, it may be contractors. And then if they're contractors in the TMC, are they contractors making, a decent salary, a professional salary, 30 bucks an hour? Or is it a bunch of kids getting paid, 13, 14 bucks an hour? I mean, basically minimum wage. Essentially, if your service patrol is responding to incidents, how do they find out about the incidents? Do they find out about dispatch? They find out from the TMC? Well, if the TMC doesn't know about the incidents, then the service patrol isn't either. Or in some cases, you have service patrols where they're being contacted directly by the troopers, and they basically have two radios with them, and they have a patrol radio, and the trooper calls the service patrol directly to say, hey, can you respond? And then they have the TMC radio. So just different ways of doing things. In Minnesota, well, the other element to that is I've had the opportunity to go to a lot of sit in a fair number of TMCs, a dozen, 20 TMCs in the last 20 years. And I have been to some really big metro area TMCs during the afternoon rush hour, and just sat in there, and it's like, how can there not be anything going on? How can there not be, crashes and stuff on fire? 'Cause if I was in Minnesota, we'd have, 3, 4 blocking crashes, there'd be a blocking stall, there'd be a couple on the shoulders, probably a good chance there'd be a chase running through, maybe a car fire, something like that. And so either, you guys are either way better drivers than Minnesota drivers are, which is possible, or you only know about 10% of the stuff that's going on. So another element of this too is on the dispatch side, and how is it all integrated into the program? So in Minnesota, um, the TMC staff is also state workers, but they are also in a professional job class. So they are hired specifically on a technical level to do the job. and a decent salary with that. About half of the dispatchers, I have 8 dispatchers, 9 dispatchers, half of them came from State Patrol dispatch, and not retired dispatchers, just dispatchers who were willing to take a little bit of a cut in the overtime, but just needed more stability with the hours. Got a couple of first drivers that are doing it too, but that's one thing that it's relatively unique, I think, for us on the TMC side. Next one. So our focus on the Minnesota end is very, very strong TIM response. So when a crash happens, it's found on camera. Service Patrol goes, signboards are up. So we are in the same room as State Patrol Dispatch, a big open room. Patrol Dispatch has let us use their CAD system since 2008. So we get the patrol events as they're put into CAD if it's something traffic related, and we can assign that to a first truck. Um, we're fortunate in that there's only 2 talk groups really, and that State Patrol is the primary responder for the freeways in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And there's 2 talk groups we can monitor. Um, and then there's a strong DOT maintenance presence in here as well. But just for an example, there's a pretty good crash. I was working the board last Friday, and a decent crash blocking a couple of lanes. We also record the traffic cameras. The camera happened to be facing that way. You could see exactly when the crash happened, and then you could see the time that the camera moved, and like, okay, there's a detection time. And it was about a minute, which is pretty good. Crash happens, somebody calls 911, routed to State Patrol, and this was up on the wall. It was known about, the signboards are up, Service Patrol's en route within a minute. It's pretty good. A lot of times it's a little bit longer than that, depending on how the calls get routed, but I thought that was a pretty good example. And it really seems like a good baseline that I would hope to shoot for. It seems like a logical baseline, at least, to shoot for. All right, next one. Now, the downside of all of this is that, yeah, we have this really strong dispatch, find stuff on camera, get the Service Patrol en route, get it, get somebody there, try to clear it if we can, put up the message boards. But on the downside, we do minimal on the 511 and on the car side. It's an auto feed coming out of CAD that says watch for a crash. And there's other states that really go 100% the other direction, and the focus is on getting it into cars and having specific information. Even if on the other side, that's maybe limiting the number of things that they're aware of or the amount of time. So just throwing it out there too. Next one. So does co-location work? I've been to several centers that are co-located. There's a picture of the Minnesota one. Far end of the room is State Patrol dispatch, basically for the metro in the northeastern part of the state. Middle of the room is our maintenance dispatch for the metro, and then the traffic management folks are kind of in the closest end of the view. So all state workers. I've been to other centers that are co-located. Some of them big open room like that, but really, the question is the information being shared. So the co-location is cool, but if the information's not being shared, or if the sharing of the information isn't valued as like a core part of the workflow, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I've been to TMCs where, yeah, the State Patrol's there, but they're on the balcony that overlooks, or maybe they're behind the glass wall or something like that. And every once in a while, they'll knock and open the door, and like, well, that's all kind of, it is what it is, right? So in our case, there is a very strong workflow between the different groups to get the information shared. Certainly, complexities in this is recognizing that a lot of the states have contracted TMC people, and whether you're private sector, whether you're public, and then what the salary differences are. I mean, there's a reasonable amount of parity on the floor between the different groups, and kind of shifts from year to year and contract stuff, but reasonable amount of parity. But there's other places where it's going to be completely different. And then really the big one um, is law enforcement and CJIS and the FBI, and whether or not the information can be shared, and what really needs to be done, and what is the training. And I caught Chris mentioned about the old NUGTIM thing about clear interoperable communications, and like it seemed like we were going, yep, 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 we were there. But now we have this, oh, we need to be encrypted, and this is all top secret, and we're going to go back the other. I think we're going to go back the other way, where it's not going to be clear and it's not going to be interoperable because of the CJIS requirements. And what do they mean? When do they have to happen? What do you have to do to fulfill it? And are there options in there? And I'm almost scared to even mention it now because things are in such amount of upheaval in Washington, D.C. that I don't know. But it's certainly one of those things that we'll see. Next, or certainly is a concern. Um, so industry challenges. Number one, are we an industry, right? And this was a project a couple of years ago was to try to make an industry association with service patrols, and it was a group of us managers trying to bring this forward and try to create an industry association, kind of similar to all of the other different groups that are out there, other different workforces that are out there, something for lobbying, something for education, something for some degree of uniformity. The problem that came up out of that is, well, there's only a few thousand Service Patrol employees nationally, right? It's a super small group. Most of them, almost all of them, are getting paid nothing. So the drivers aren't going to pay any money to be part of a group. The states aren't going to pay any money to be part of it. And it's such a wide diversity of different types of equipment and trucks that are out there that there's no vendor who's gonna sponsor it. So there basically wasn't any money to do all of that kind of logistics that you need of an industry association, like even just hiring somebody to make the web page or do the stuff or make the things, let alone doing anything else out of that. So the industry association I think kind of fizzled out for that reason. Um, and again, kind of going back to how many different models, how many different programs there are out there on the national level and how widely different they are. Um, but really, police, fire, EMS, tow are all pretty understood, expected at a scene or expected as part of the conversation. Is SSP part of that? Would anybody notice in your area? Would anybody notice in our area if they went away? And how to really make that rooted in there that, yes, this is part. There are 5 parts of this. There aren't 4 parts of it. Next one. Yeah. So, the political essentiality, and hopefully to a point it's evolved to that. But, if the economy tanks, is it first to go? And again, that post 9/11 crunch is where our program came in along with the political side of it and really gunning after state workers. Where are we? How strong are we? And what does that mean to maintain that? Next one. And so these are some of the national things. This came out of the last Service Patrol meeting, or out of the last pooled fund study. Was that some of the states that were having contracted programs were getting called by their contractor saying because of the dramatic increase in cost of insurance, that the contractors who provide the service patrol, the safety service patrol, couldn't do it anymore because it was too expensive. And then they were turning to the states. And I don't know what the states were going to do, but basically the contractor was saying we can't afford to run the program that we're contracted to do because we can't pay the insurance. Next one. Safety is again just kind of wrapping on some of the stuff, some of the things that were discussed at the last at the last pooled fund study. Safety, struck by incidents obviously are going to be a big one. I think anybody on this call is probably fairly familiar with the concept of a struck by and what that means. But you can also add in the assaults part of it. Louisiana had lost a driver, a service patrol driver, who was stabbed to death 2 years ago, and it wasn't by the person he was assisting. It was just somebody came out of the woods with a knife and attacked him and stabbed him to death. And when the officers arrived, they shot and killed the guy. So then that kind of leads into discussions about there are programs nationally that are issuing body armor, and body armor is expensive and it is not very comfortable. So the idea of going to a level of having armor on your service patrol, there were programs that were doing pepper spray, issuing pepper spray for self-defense, and there were even some departments where concealed carry was allowed, which is crazy to me on an administrative level that you would have that. But I can also totally understand it from a driver level, especially if you were out there at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I think that ability would certainly make a lot of sense to do that, but it's also just crazy on a department level to be at that point. Next one. Yeah, and like I mentioned, at least for us in Minnesota, A huge amount. We are hugely reliant on this cooperation with State Patrol and being able to have this clear information going back and forth, and what CGIS and what the FBI and what the different states interpretation of this means, and what that means as far as cooperation. And hopefully it goes off on a good path. But so far, so much of this is so state dependent, and who the individuals are. I would see this as being a big challenge. It's a big challenge to us in the future. One more, I think. Next one. Yeah. So, and you can go again. So one nice thing I will mention, one closing this slide on a positive one. Um, the so I presented about this last year, was about the debris removal systems for the service patrols, better ways to be able to get debris out of the lane. Um, the swiper, which is made by Musterman, which is the St. Louis, Missouri DOT system, should now be on the Minnesota state contract. So if your state or your entity is part of the collaborative purchasing agreement, you should be able to buy this device off of the Minnesota contract. And I think the cost was about $6,700, and that includes a push bumper. And I think that was just the standard Zips push bumper. So, um, certainly, yeah, an alternative to the much more expensive models that are out there. Next slide. All right, so I will mention a couple of resources. Safehighways.org and the Idea Sharing Network. 10 years. 10 years have been doing this. Quarterly webinars. I will point out that safehighways.org, just for being clear, it is part of Travelers Marketing. And if you're familiar with Travelers, if you are part of Travelers Marketing, or if you're familiar with Travelers Marketing, they do the sponsorship. So if you've seen the Service Patrol, State Farm Service Patrol, Geico Service Patrol as Travelers Marketing, safehighways.org and the idea sharing has been very good. Sam has been very good about keeping that separate. So quarterly webinars, you can sign up for the notification if you go to the website. All of these Service Patrol meetings, these sessions are recorded and replayable. I would suggest, if you want just something for fun, check out 19, 20, and 28. Those were state show and tell. So it was basically 4 or 5, you had an hour, hour and a half, and states had 10, 15 minutes to talk about what their patrol does and how it's set up. And some of them are pretty basic, just going through how the truck is, and then some of them expanded out to be quite a bit more. So if you are not familiar with this resource, strongly advise setting it up, getting connected with it, and then signing up for the webinars too, and checking out some of the sessions. It is a good resource. And then the pooled fund study. Third year, going on the third year of this. I hope with all of the things that are happening that this all still exists. I hope it is a lot of this comes out of the same thing what I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes, how different all of the programs are, and just this attempt to try to get some sort of cohesive understanding and ability to communicate with each other. One of the projects, or the big projects underway right now, which is being done by Volpe, is just trying to collect from the different states and trying to put together some sort of a book that has information on the different programs, and really trying to kind of build some sort of a framework to be able to just talk about how these programs are. So that's, like I say, it's going in the third year. If if you have the resources to do it, just like Jim said, recommend that you add in. There's some programs that are out there that would be great to have part of it. Because again, I think the more diversity in the pooled fund study, the better it is, because the more we can all learn from each other. So if you are not part of this, or you've not heard of it before, please check into it. Please reach out to Jim. Um, and strong, and it's not like a huge commitment. I won't get into all the details of how it all works, but it's not a huge commitment, and it's not like your state's money either. It's all very complicated, but yeah, it's a good program. And the more people that are part of it, the better it's going to be. And I think that's it. Next slide. All right, thank you. And I will turn it back over to Jim. Thanks, everybody.
with that, I'm going to move to our Q&A here. And we have John, Chris, and John and Chris can turn on their cameras again. We have some questions, Vishali, on the Q&A in the chat pod. Have we addressed all of those, Vishali?
Question. I think the only one that we did address, but if you want to speak more to, is national accreditation for safety service patrol programs.
Yeah,
National,
and
that was a question for
yeah.
John.
Go ahead, John.
yeah, I that is an interesting idea, but again, it is such a crazy field full of cats all doing their own cat stuff that getting it to a point where you'd be able to say, okay, you're all cats, you all use this same litter box, and you all drink out of the same water bowl. That's still a ways to go, and what that looks like. And if you say, well, you're gonna, to be accredited, you need to do A, B, and C. There's going to be at least a third of the programs. Well, we only do A and B, or we only do A and C. So it's an interesting thought, and I think it's probably on the wish list, but I don't know what that looks like yet. And trying to have it be useful enough. And really, that was a lot of the point of the industry association, and then that didn't go anywhere. Maybe the pooled fund study will help at least facilitate this communication and get everybody in the same room. But I think that's still a long ways off. But it's certainly a good one to mention, though. It's a good one to keep bringing up, though.
Absolutely. And to that point, as you were speaking earlier, John, you've heard me say this before. States, DOTs, and the SSP programs, or TIM programs as a whole, I believe, do not do enough to wave their flag of success. And it's not always easy, because you have to have a good relationship with your public affairs officers, your PIOs, your communications officers, and inform them about the great work that the service patrols did on a particular incident, day, or what have you, and do that all the time. Some states do a little better in that area, but I can tell you, in Washington, D.C., when I ran the program, working in collaboration with VDOT and Maryland SHA, all the time we were saying and talking over the airwaves, radio airwaves, that is, not so much TV, but radio airwaves, about the great work that the patrol services provide to the motoring public. So keep that in mind. Okay, so what about our canned questions here? Vishali, do you want to go? Because there was some great points made by both. I know Chris in particular, his weekly, he has weekly meetings with, I think you said, districts, Chris, and then you had the monthly or quarterly meetings statewide with the statewide group.
Yeah.
Can you speak
Jim,
a little? Go ahead,
I'm sorry,
Vishali.
go ahead.
No.
Yeah, so I think, you mentioned that you have the monthly and quarterly, well, let's see, nationally, a lot of TIM groups meet monthly and quarterly, but your statewide group meets weekly. So can you speak more to what you cover in these weekly meetings, who participates in the weekly meetings, and the value you find from this weekly touch base?
Sure. We meet weekly with most of the major metropolitan region TIM coordinators, as well as our AECOM consultants. Most of the time, we're discussing current events, traffic incidents that have occurred on Texas roadways. We talk about the content for upcoming bi-monthly webinars, as well as content that's coming to the next newsletter. So we we don't find it necessary that Sean and I have to be the focus of each newsletter. So everyone kind of checks their ego at the door, and whoever has a topic that we think is going to garner the most interest in traffic incident management, that's kind of how we pick what goes on the front page of the TIM newsletter. It's a recap of the previous quarter, where trainings have been conducted, new innovation that's coming out from TxDOT, from drone usage to VSLs and dynamic messaging signs. We cover all of that. Recently, we covered the difference between the old concrete barriers that you see here in Texas versus the high tension cable system. So it's just a meeting of the minds and a collaborative effort to put the best information out to the audience. And then we do the same with the bi-monthly as well. When the timing lines up, we use the bi-monthly to garner interest in the upcoming newsletter, and vice versa. If the newsletter comes out ahead of time, then we'll use the newsletter to garner information for the upcoming webinar. But the topics are vast, and we try not to do too many repeats in the webinars or the newsletters. Every once in a while, we'll bring back a speaker just because there was a lot of interest in the topic, or it's still an ongoing thing. For instance, here in Texas, we have a lieutenant with Lubbock Fire that's leading the way for, helmets for first responders that are working incident scenes on high-speed roadways. And then in the coming newsletter and webinars, we're really trying to spread the word on the on-scene blood transfusion that a lot of EMS agencies here in Central Texas are going to.
That's pretty impressive. I think what's unique is that you're not, like you said, shouldering the load for the newsletter on just TxDOT, but you are relying on your partners at all of the regions. Very few states have quarterly TIM newsletters. Do you have any suggestions, or what might it take for other states to copy your success? And I think what's unique you shared in your presentation is that anytime you have a TIM responder that's trained, you add them to your newsletter. So you're growing your subscriber list. But what's your sort of recipe or guidance for others that may not yet have a newsletter?
Well, I think one of the big advantages we have, and kudos to our predecessor, is neither Sean nor I can take credit for building a great TIM program. We were fortunate to walk into one, and we've provided some updates to the program, but we started with a great program to begin with. We advertise and talk about the newsletter on a regular basis. Every TIM training we do, we discuss the newsletter. It's really building that subscriber base. We've learned that if the newsletter is 6 pages long, and I can look at the metrics after the distribution of the newsletter, around page 3 or 4, people start to lose interest. So the same thing with our webinars, where initially the model was to book 2 or 3 speakers, to give each one of them 10 to 15 minutes to talk about a topic. And the newsletter, was filled with multiple articles. And we quickly realized that a lot of the speakers during their presentation would say, this is something I was going to cover, but I was out of time. Or I wanted to talk about this, but I only have 10 minutes. We quickly decided that we wanted to build on quality of content over quantity of content, and really just started limiting it to 1 or 2. A lot of the webinars have both an in-person and virtual attendance option, and it garners a lot of just organic conversation that comes out of it. So the one thing we try not to do is to cut a speaker off to a time limit, because if there's audience participation, especially from the first responder community, we want to keep that going, and not just, okay, the 20 minutes is up. So we really try to focus on quality of content versus quantity. And the newsletter is the same. If it's a topic that's worthy of 2 pages that's putting life-saving information out, we're going to go with that over a standardized approach to the newsletter of this is the page where we discuss this topic, or this is the page where we present this. We really just try to be free-flowing and put the best information out there. And, you know, if that's 2 articles for the entire newsletter, we'd rather put something out that people are going to read than put something out that people get a page or 2 into and then, you know, click the X at the top of the screen to close it.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Mhm.
Jim, back to you. I know we have a couple more questions for John as well, but I didn't know if you wanted to sort of spotlight, like Chris said, there's really a very strong energized program that was developed at TxDOT over the last, I want to say 5 years or so, and it's just going gangbusters. So any more questions for Chris?
Not for Chris right now. I'd like to ask John a question, which is, and apologize if you touched on these a little bit, John, but what types of training do your service patrols receive in Minnesota and elsewhere? Can you share some information?
Yeah, so Minnesota is basically all on the job. And there's not a lot of turnover. So the program, it's a small program. The turnover has not been too crazy. You know, it's a couple of years. We have been hiring. Most recently, we've been hiring out of the tow industry. It's kind of one of these things that for a while it was like a bunch of fire volunteers, some retired people, and then it was some volunteer fire. And then we started shifting in the tow, which was one of these things where you hire one tow driver and then they have some friends and then they call some other friends and then they come in. So the last few years has been really tow heavy. Um, so a lot of it, I mean, really all of our training is on the job. It's they ride for a week with the supervisor and then they ride with each driver on the shift. And at the end, and then each of the drivers signs off on them and says, yeah, no, they're okay, they're okay, they're okay. And then it kind of goes that way. So we do not do any classroom or any formal training. And that's very different than some other states that have like multiple week like academies and stuff like that. We don't do that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. What about the economics of providing a safety service patrol, John? How are you guys funded? And
So ours is, again, every area is going to be completely different. Ours is part of the traffic management center. So the traffic management center has its budget, like, I don't know, 4 million, 5 million, something like that a year. And that includes like 60 staff people, including the people who fix the cameras, who go out and fix stuff, and then the people who design the fiber and design where things are going to be, and the integrators who plug stuff in, the TMC dispatchers, and then the service patrol. So ours is funded out of the DOT budget and is specifically to the traffic management center. Probably very different than a lot of other states who are all going to have their own ways of doing it.
okay, well, thank you for that.
I will mention mention one quick thing. I know there's 1 or 2 questions about Swiper and about the debris clearance, and without getting into a lot of the details of that, probably the easiest thing is just contact me about it, and we can talk more about it. It's basically, this was Missouri DOT's project, and they had 2 projects, and we tested them, and we liked the one, and then we went through that subcontractor that Missouri DOT was going, but it's all like this is all like little things that have kind of like now they're slightly larger, but they are not like marketed like the big expensive one is marketed. So probably the easiest thing is just contact me directly if you want to talk about debris clearance stuff.
Very
And
good.
there's one more question for Chris. Are you holding these events in person or hybrid virtual meetings or both? And I'm guessing that question from Terry Thompson is related perhaps both to the weekly meetings that you were talking about and then the bi-monthly outreach efforts.
Okay, the weekly meeting that we have is virtual. And then the bi-monthly webinars, we have both an in-person and online element so that we're able to attend them in person. The presenters are generally also in person. periodically, if they're out of state, then we would have them present virtually. But for the most part, the presenters and myself and Sean are in person, along with whoever the local stakeholders are. And then there is a virtual portion that's online for people that are further away.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris, what about the percentage of funding federal versus state?
Yeah, I'm looking at that in the chat. TxDOT receives its annual budget from the state. So my full-time position here with TxDOT, as well as Sean's, is all part of state funds. Nothing that funds our participation in the program comes from the federal government.
Okay. By the way, on your bi-monthly webinars that I have had the pleasure of listening into from time to time, is there a link? I know Jim Comfort, you usually have Jim, he's on a contractor team, I believe. Sends out the link.
Jim handles sending out the link as well as the agenda and, putting together and combining the presenter slide deck. But if anyone wants to subscribe to that, they can just go to the TxDOT page and click on the subscribe button. It'll send us an email, and then we can add that email to the invite list.
Yes, sir. I try to steer many of our friends across the country to your bi-monthly because it's just fantastic. And
we appreciate that. We are really looking forward to the next one. If everything goes as planned, sometimes it doesn't always happen. A presenter has to cancel, but the next one, we're hoping to hear from both the medical side as well as the business side of these agreements that our local EMS agencies have with the blood banks here to provide that on-scene blood transfusion.
Yeah, and that whole effort in the EMS world with the blood, whole blood, real blood being made available at crash scenes is an incredible initiative that stands to save a lot of the lives. And I've heard as many as 40% of the, let's just say 35 approximately 1,000 fatalities that occur every year. Think about that. EMS, paramedics, EMTs having whole blood on scene to administer to someone with life-threatening injuries that's bleeding out, and now their life is being saved by the fact that there's whole blood being administered to them on scene, and then later when they continue their journey to being transported to a trauma center. This is new stuff that's happening.
We have an agency here in Central Texas that within the last year, I don't have the exact number, but it is well over 500 units of real blood that they've used on scene, with a dramatic increase of survivability for the patient before they get to the hospital.
Exactly. That is just wonderful. Thank you. So we have about 8 minutes left.
Well, I think we're almost out of time. We typically try to finish about 10 minutes in advance of the 3 p.m. mark.
We do?
So we do.
I thought we always go 10 minutes over. But no, I love it. I love it. Anything else from any of our audience? Now's the time you can speak up, open your mic. If anybody has anything they want to share. Kevin, are they able to do that?
And
I see.
Go ahead.
Now, I just see so many friends on this call, and it's been a delight to see all of you here. again, as I've said, the champions and leaders in TIM across this land. So we should all be very proud. And
there's a new question from Tony Casella, noting that from some of their Towards Zero Death coordinators, that not everyone has time for TIM coalition meetings 2 or more times a year. These are the in-person meetings. Have you any experience related to that, and how did you handle it?
I think we encounter that a lot in the TIM community with first responders, where no one has time for training until an incident happens. So we do talk about a lot. One of the philosophies that we share quite often is not to let tragedy drive your training, to stay proactive, to stay ahead of it. I'm hearing an echo for some reason, but there's a study that shows it just takes one person to change the mind of an entire crowd to take action. So one of the big challenges we have and put out there to a lot of our audience is be the person that makes the decision to take action. And you'll be surprised at how many people are willing to step up alongside of you. It just takes one to make that difference. So between that and, we preach a lot of, like I said, about not letting tragedy drive your training. Don't wait until you've had a, massive fatality on the highway to then decide to call your TIM coordinators and set up training. You just do your best to stay ahead of it and keep people active, keep people engaged by interesting topics. And I think it's one of those things where we saw an improvement in attendance when we started focusing on 1 or 2 quality presenters with good information to put out, instead of trying to pack 3 or 4 presenters that were limited on time into the same time span.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Well, I am going to close it out then, Vishali, with a huge thank you to Christopher Gray from TxDOT and John McClellan from Minnesota DOT. Thank you so much for your presentations. And as was said earlier, folks, you should make it a point to grab the recordings off of the National Operations Center of Excellence. I want to extend a big thank you as well to Kevin Vida and of course Vishali Shah for their efforts here. Without them, we can't make this possible. And to each and every one of you, a huge virtual hug from Jim Ostrich. You know me, I'm kind of a sentimental guy, and wish you all the best. And oh, wait a minute. Oh boy, Tom Martin. I can't ignore Tom Martin. He raised his hand. Tom Martin, are you there? Go ahead, Tom.
Jim, if you can hear me, it's great to
Can hear you. Can hear you, Tom.
Again, my friend.
Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
No, I did not. If I raised my hand, it was by accident.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Tom is a legend as well. Tom is a retired captain with the Virginia State Police. We worked together many years ago. He was in the state of Virginia, obviously Virginia State Police, and we trailblazed, broke down a lot of barriers and did a lot of great things. So thank you, Tom. Great to hear your
Jim.
voice.
Good to hear from you.
Thank you. And so once again, thank you all. God bless. Stay safe. Keep your head on a swivel. Our roadways are not nice places to be. And you could be here today, gone tomorrow. So we'll see you next time.